Okay, now there should be no sound issues. Let's see. Yes, got it. Ooh. There we go. Yay! Yeah, I don't know what was up. I got new quiet comforts recently, and I think I'm still getting the hang of like what's going on with the audio sometimes because they're working at first and then didn't go well for some unknown reason. So now that the audio is back up, I'm just going to quickly post out to everyone so that people know where to find us. Audio issues. Okay. So now we can actually start going through questions. Feel free to ask whatever you're interested in hearing about. I know I saw somebody commented on the differential privacy and federated learning video. I'm definitely glad that you guys like that video. This was definitely a lot more technical than other videos that I've done in the past. But it's something that I used to do research in. I think it's a pretty cool topic. And because I'm going to be doing more one-on-ones that actually have like coding components in it, I'm hoping that that's, useful for you guys, stuff that you can kind of see and do yourself. And so this Friday is actually going to be another AI 101 that relates to, the whole reason why we're doing this whole social distancing stuff. So we're going to be looking at outbreak prediction, and I'm going to be walking you guys through a tutorial on how you can do that yourselves using collab networks. So like I said in the other stream, sorry about some of the audio issues. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them. And I should be here for like an hour or so before I have to get back to like actually doing work. Okay, first question, how can AI help combat the issue of pandemics? So like I mentioned in my video on how an AI system was used to predict the coronavirus outbreak, one of the ways that we can definitely do that is by just anticipating these things so that you can kind of know what preventative and like mitigation steps to take in order to minimize the severity of these outbreaks before they even happen. Another thing that people are starting to use the AI for now is like if you want to get a better understanding of how the virus actually works. There's a lot of work on like understanding like molecular structures using data science. It's one of those things where it's like, do you call that AI or not? It's a little iffy. It's stuff that people have been doing before we started calling it AI. But you can definitely use it for the development of like therapeutics. You can use it to help predict further spread. So one of the things that's actually come out either today or yesterday is that Clear AI, our friends who like to scrape all of our public photos from like every social media website, which is against all of their terms of service, are interested in working with the government to like help do contact tracing, which is figuring out like if you have one person who has it, how do you like who are all the people that person has interacted with, and then who have those people interacted with, so that you can like figure out how it's spreading. And so Cleaver AI is interested in using like facial recognition and surveillance technology to do that for all of us, which it's one of those ideas that isn't necessarily a bad idea at face value, but like of all the companies to do it, I probably wouldn't want it to be that one because they've just done everything in the most sketchy way possible so far. So those are a couple ways that AI can help combat issues of pandemics. Next question. Oh, how important is neuroscience in the field of artificial intelligence? And are they at a point where they develop in parallel? Does AI still take tips from neuroscience, or are they even related? So this is an interesting question. There have been a couple articles out in places like Scientific American and whatnot lately on like whether or not your brain is like a computer. And there's a lot of debate on this topic. But my essential stance on it is your brain is not like your laptop. So your brain is not a computer in the sense that we think about computers, but it does perform computation. And I think that that's an important distinction. So I would say that, neuroscience was definitely one of the original things that got people into developing models like neural networks. But they're not, at least in the direction of neuroscience to artificial intelligence, I wouldn't say that they're super related fields as much anymore. I don't think that AI necessarily takes as much, structural lessons from the brain as much as it used to, just because there comes a point where like neural networks were designed to look ideally the way that like neurons interact in our brain, but the way that neurons interact in our brain don't have the structure that neural networks do, because that would just be really hard to implement, and would not necessarily be more useful, or at least we wouldn't understand it if it was. I would say are they at a point where they develop in parallel? Yeah, I don't really think so anymore. I think that there are other biological phenomena that AI definitely takes like advice, so to speak, from. One of them is like evolutionary biology, actually. There's like evolutionary networks that rely less on like traditional data science approaches and more on how evolutionary biology works for how you develop and how you train that kind of model. And we've seen some really interesting results on that. I think I might do an AI 101 on that at some point. But yeah, I wouldn't say that they're super closely related in that direction. Going in the opposite direction, if you look at like how influential AI is on neuroscience, I think that there's also a similarly hot debate in the field about that. There's a lot of people who are working on modeling different parts of the brain using neural networks, and developing AI models that would replicate those things. And so I think that that's actually really interesting. And so the question, I think there's the distinction between like, is the model accurate and is it useful? And I think that it's fair to say in most cases that the model is not necessarily accurate. It doesn't necessarily perfectly describe, or even close to perfectly describe, like the way that your brain actually works. But they are useful models in a lot of ways to understand or confirm things that we think about how the brain is working. So like the visual processing system is a really interesting example of something like that. Okay, next question. That was a very long answer. Somebody asked, is folding at home using AI? I don't know what folding at home is, so I can't really speak to that. Somebody has a long question. So you're trying to explain supervised machine learning to people who are new to it. And one simple concept that you're trying to explain is statistics in terms of predictions. But when you add a neural network with multiple layers and convolution, magic happens. Yep, follow all that so far. Oh, okay. And then the key after that is getting hyper-specialized data to make the right predictions, and all of this is yielding great breakthrough models and algorithms. So the better than humans thing, I'm always a little bit wary of saying. I think that there are some cases where it is. I think that there are some cases where it's not. And then there are also a lot of cases where they're better together, which is, I think, actually pretty cool. Especially in medicine, you see a lot of examples of like the model performs this well, the person performs like this well, and then when you put them together, they actually perform better. I think so far that example looks generally correct. Yeah, I guess I'd be curious as to what part of it people don't get. My guess is that it probably has something to do with the magic part, because like if you don't, it's hard to explain how neural networks work if you're avoiding the nonlinear aspect of it, essentially, because that's like really the really important part. Like that's what separates it from things like linear regression, and that's something that can be really hard to explain without kind of getting into the math and showing like, if you don't use activation functions, then you essentially get like a y is equal to some weight matrix times x. Whereas when you do start to use activation functions, you get like this much more complex equation that can describe different phenomena in more detail. So I think that that's, so the way that I probably can't bring this up here because it's a live stream, but I ended up doing a presentation on this for when I was at Stanford. And I gave an example of a neural network with all the different layers and like what the model sees at different layers. And people actually found that pretty helpful because it's just a visual way of understanding at the entry layers, you get like edges, and then like these edges build into shapes, and these shapes build into structures, and at the end you get something that represents kind of the broader picture of what you're actually looking at. So I think people found that to be helpful when I do that. You can try that. But yeah, it's a little hard to explain aside from that, unless you're getting a little bit deeper into the math itself. Because I'm taking a machine learning class in MIT right now, and it's funny because a lot of the stuff that we cover is stuff that I self-learned before I started working at Stanford. And to learn it more formally just really solidifies the fact that understanding the math is very crucial to understanding the rest of it. So at some point I will be doing a video on linear algebra, or you can go check out Grant Sanderson's channel because he's been doing this forever and is much better at it than I am. I might actually try to use his math animation stuff for an upcoming video. We'll see. Grant's great. His organization of that repository is not fantastic. And so that can make just wading through his stuff a little bit more challenging. Any other questions? How's everybody doing? Working from home? I've been working from home for the last week. What's my favorite thing about AI? That's a hard question. I guess so there's two sides of it. There's from an applications perspective, what's my favorite use of AI? And then there's kind of the what's my favorite thing about doing AI, I guess. From the applications perspective, I think that, obviously, so my PhD is going to be in medical engineering and medical physics. So I'm very interested in how AI is going to change the medical field and how we practice medicine. And I think that that's really interesting and definitely has the potential to just have really, really positive impacts on people. Like there are people in my department who work on like, if you have, you know, the first 20 years of someone's medical records, like the first 20 years of their life, and you want to find out if they're going to develop like a chronic disease or like something like that in the future, then like how do you develop models that predict out like the rest of their life from that? And you know, if you can do that with like some level of accuracy, like that's a game changer. That's wild. In terms of what I like about, I guess, being someone who works on AI, so I'm just generally better at like applied work than I am at theory work. And so I just like the problem solving nature of it. Like I like having to figure out like, here's my data set. Is it even in the like the right format that I need? How do I put it in the right format? What kind of like model makes sense for this? How do you try to start at like the most simple model, and get more complex if you need it. Because not everything needs a deep neural network thrown at it. In fact, most things don't. And then like, okay, I trained the model. It did like, how do I make the model better? What other things could I change to like make a better model? So I think that's probably the thing that I really like about doing it. Next question. How do you think AI will affect our social interactions in the future? I'm thinking on the basis of big changes that are seen because of social media. So I think that, as I kind of mentioned in the YouTube radicalization video, the internet and then AI as like a part of the internet has this tendency to force us into these filter bubbles, and that can just like make it so that, you know, if you're spending all your time online, if you're only interacting with a certain group of people, then you don't necessarily have like the social literacy to then go interact with other groups of people. And so I think that in that sense, it will probably have some sort of, honestly, probably detrimental effect on our social interactions with each other. But at the same time, it can connect you to like communities of people that you never would have discovered before. And I think that can be really good. So I think in the online sense, it won't have that much more of a effect than it currently does. The big thing will be like, you know, how good can you make a model? How good can your recommendations be, and things like that. In terms of, I guess, in the real world, I'm not sure. So I guess, you know, the polarization online definitely translates to some real world interactions. But I think that a lot of it's going to be more like, where do we just see it ingrained into our social interactions in the future? Like, do you see more automation? And this is another thing which I also have to do a video on at some point. Like, there's like new technology, automation, and AI, and they're separate things. And so I don't think that like AI specifically is necessarily going to be like really affecting our social interactions in the future, but like new technology that might involve some sort of predictive system, or like something that, you know, as we see like AI incorporated more into like Tinder and things like that, like if that actually gets decent, because currently it sucks, then like you might see it interacting in that way. But I think that that's like definitely hard to predict from an interactions perspective. Cosmic Rider says, hey, hope is always going well for you. Thank you. Hopefully everything's going well for you and everybody else here too. I know it's a bit of a stressful time for a lot of people, which is why I kind of wanted to have this chat, just to like hang out. And so yeah, hopefully everyone is at home, or if you have to go to work, then, you know, you're getting the protections and the support that you need in order to get your work done, and that we're all gonna make it through this whole weird thing that we're in. Also, is there a project that you really want to do but you don't have the resources for, AI or in general? So there's you can't see it from here because it's over there. There's a project that I've been working on for, it's March, probably about 3 months now. And this project is the project that I wanted to do that I like didn't have the resources for before. And that was largely because I mean, it's just not a cheap project to do. Luckily, I actually got someone to sponsor that video. So this is, I think, if you're a patron, then you saw in my latest blog post that there's a big video that I'm trying to get out either, I mean, it's not gonna be this Friday because I actually just changed my schedule, but I'm hoping for next Friday. And so this is that project. So this project probably costs about $1,000 total to pull off, which, like, as a grad student who doesn't make money off of this, isn't necessarily in the budget. But yeah, I think that was probably the big project, and I am intentionally being baked because it's like a project that I'm really excited about, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. But that was probably the big project that I wanted to do before that I didn't have the resources for. Now I think one of the big things I want to do, so at some point I'm going to do a video on like optical neural networks, which are like neural networks that are made with like these chips that like reflect light in different ways, and they can like do the like forward pass and like the back propagation like using light. And I think that that's so cool. And so that's something that I definitely want to do a video on at some point, but I'd also really be interested in like finding a way to build one and show you guys how to build one. And so I just need to figure out like who I need to talk to in order to do that, because it's like mostly academic right now. I'll answer this question quickly. Did they shut down MIT and Harvard? So essentially, yes. All the undergrads have been kicked out unless they're international students who can't either like are from a country that's being hit harder than the US is, so like Italy, or if they'd be worried about like not being able to get a reentry visa. So most of the undergrads are gone. The institute's encouraging everyone to work from home, which is what I've been doing for the past week. And yeah, I mean, so technically until at least Friday, MIT is still like doing research, but most of the buildings are going down to essential personnel only, which is like 1 or 2 people. Luckily, most of my stuff can be done from home anyway. Like right now, I'm actually running code in the background that's been running for 2.5 hours now. I'm doing some data processing. But yeah, MIT is like effectively shut down. Like my classes are all remote now. And Harvard is also effectively shut down right now. So yep. Massachusetts General is actually, so there are people in my program who do research there. They're still doing research, I think. And anyone who's doing coronavirus related research is still doing research. So like I have friends who are like working on coronavirus related research and they're still in lab. Backing up, how did I get into AI? So I did, I guess, a longer video on this if you want like a way more in-depth explanation. But the short answer is that I started in tissue engineering, and I am lucky that I had a grad student that I worked with who could see that I was not interested in wet lab work before I could, because I actually thought that's what I was going to go into for well, a long time. And it was mostly because I had, well, so I'd done like biomaterials and material science research in high school at Columbia. And then I have a partially herniated disc in my lower back. So I thought that I was basically going to do like intervertebral disc engineering research. But then I got into this lab and ended up realizing that I was more interested in the computational side of things with the help of the grad students that I worked with, and got to do more computational stuff. So I was doing like data science work. That was kind of reinforced when I spent a summer at Novartis, where I was also doing data science work for some of their preclinical data. And I kind of realized at that point that like computational would probably be my speed. I was also doing, I was part of the first class for my major, biomedical engineering at Cornell. And so we got to like have a lot of flexibility in our schedule, which I'm sure they figured out was a bad idea after our class, but that's okay. And we had to pick a specialization. So I picked instrumentation and imaging. So I also got to do a lot of like circuits classes and like building devices and whatnot. I was actually just joking to one of my friends. If you follow me on Twitter, you've seen that I was actually recently diagnosed with ADHD. And so MIT Medical is like completely shut down. So I can't get like, you have to get a evaluation before they can consider you for like any sort of meds, which I'm not entirely sure that I'd want to go on anyway. But one of the things is an EKG, and I was joking like, well, I've built an EKG like 6 or 7 times now, so I could just do it from home. But yeah, so I got into AI when I went to spend a summer at Stanford after my junior year. And I hadn't had any background in machine learning at that point, and got assigned to a project that was a machine learning project. So I took the machine learning class on Coursera that basically everyone takes. And that's kind of how I got into it. And yes, I can link to the video where I talk about that journey. Once I can find it. Somewhere around here. Here we go. Yes. Am I at home? Yes. Does the optical stuff count as quantum computing? Not really. It doesn't involve any like quantum stuff. It's purely optics. Oh, somebody's getting over what may or may not have been a mild case of coronavirus. Well, hopefully you're feeling better. It's always funny, they talk about like how 80% of the cases are mild, but what they don't say is that mild ranges from asymptomatic to outpatient pneumonia. So hopefully you were on the more mild side of that spectrum and that you're feeling better. What is your personal opinion on whether humanoid AGI is possible and whether or not it be conscious? Do you think there's an unmeasurable aspect to human consciousness that can't be copied? So I guess I'll answer the second question first. We don't have a good enough definition of consciousness for us to really like be able to even put that label on something else. So I think that's the first thing. And so because of that, I think that there is on some level an unmeasurable aspect to human consciousness that like, you know, even if you put all the parts together in the right way, you wouldn't necessarily get what we have. My personal opinion on whether humanoid AGI is possible is with our current infrastructure, no. Whenever we talk about AI on this channel and in general, when you see it in popular media, we're talking about narrow AI, we're talking about machine learning basically applied to very specific problems. And one of the things that I've talked about in AI 101 is the fact that like often when you run into issues with AI, it's because the question that you thought you were asking is not the question that you're actually asking with the way that you've either set up your data or set up your model. And so I think the idea of a general AI is just like so far off from where we are now. And I think that a lot of the media hype around that is like the hype. Do I think it would be possible? Is kind of a different question. I think, so quantum computing to me is kind of interesting in this sense, in that the amount of time that it would take to build a model that could theoretically generalize better is much shorter. And so in theory, then like maybe. But even then, I'm personally kind of unconvinced of it. And I don't know if I would call it conscious. I think that we would need to nail down a better definition for human consciousness before we could really talk about something else being conscious. So, where else are we? I think that's everyone's questions so far. Just tosses back Red Bull casually. Yeah, I drink probably too much caffeine. Such is life. We need robot psychologists like an iRobot. I mean, I'm not trying to go for like a her kind of attachment to software, essentially. I think that hopefully we'll all be able to keep our human psychologists in the long term, even if like, you start switching to something like telemedicine, which could actually be really cool for something like that. But yeah, I don't know that I'd really want a robot psychologist. Like, I like my therapist is chill. She's not a robot. Other questions? Let's see. Oh, more coronavirus updates. When you were in high school, did you ever imagine that you'd be doing the type of work that you do? Not really. Oh, robotic psychologist for the robots? Yeah, probably. I'm sure they'll have their own issues because of us. So I guess when I was in high school, at first I thought I was going to be a doctor. I was pre-med as an undergrad. And then I realized that I wasn't super into practicing medicine. And so I thought I was going to be purely engineering. I actually did robotics in middle school and quit because all of the girls kept getting assigned to the presentation part and all of the boys kept getting assigned to the actually building the robot part. So I didn't think that, like, I guess I didn't think it was an option for me. So it was something I definitely thought about doing, but like, it didn't seem like it was an avenue that I could pursue, I guess. So I didn't think that I would be doing like neuro work at all. I wasn't super interested in the brain at that point. So the neuroscience stuff is definitely newer. But the computation stuff less so. Like I took APCS. I kind of knew that I was into like engineering broadly. Are most grad students these days studying AI techniques on Coursera, even if they're pursuing other fields? Seems like it might be the case. So I definitely think that there's a lot more self-study of like programming broadly, because it's kind of expected by now that you come into grad school with some level of like programming skill. Coursera is one of the places. People also just take like classes. Like the class that I'm taking right now is 6862, which is applied machine learning at MIT for people who aren't in the CS department. And it's basically like a survey course of machine learning with a research project. And so there's a lot of people who take that because it just gives you like, a flavor for the whole field and some basic skills. So aside from that, though, I would say that most people are probably picking stuff up online. It's just a lot easier to like figure out what thing you need for your specific use case. Because a lot of the time it's like, I have this data, I want this output. How do I do that? And so you don't need to take a bunch of classes or like get a degree in that. You can just Google it. What are my thoughts on computational linguistics? I mean, I think it's an interesting field. NLP is an interesting field. I did an AI 101 video on it at one point. There's actually, I was reading something recently. There's a company that will like use AI to like scan your writing to see if it has like political bias, which is always one of those things where I'm like, who's defining what political bias is? Because like that could go in any direction. I think that it is an interesting and useful field. I think that one of the things with like natural language processing broadly is like it's been very English focused. And so I think we're starting to see more people apply data science to non-English languages. And that's actually what I'm really interested in seeing more of. Because I think that there's probably a lot more interesting stuff that you can get by like comparing between languages or like just studying other languages in general that you can get from like purely looking at English. Is it worth going into computer science and academia if you aren't really a math person? It depends entirely on what you want to do. So like, if you're only looking at applied, then you don't necessarily need it, but I also generally advocate for everyone taking math courses before they start getting into like machine learning work, because, or at least at some point, you don't have to do it beforehand, especially if you're self-studying. But like the main way that I've become better at AI development is by understanding the math that underlies the things that I'm doing. Because then you can start like, then essentially when you're like changing all your hyperparameters and whatnot, what that does, which may not be intuitive. And then you can also start kind of building your own models from scratch. which is a lot easier when you kind of understand the math. Let's see. I think it also depends on like how much you enjoy theory. I'm a person who does not. I really, it doesn't come naturally to me essentially, and so I find it very difficult. So that's why like I did a CS minor as an undergrad, but did not do like a CS double major, and that's why my concentration is in CS right now. But like that's not like the end all be all of what I do, and I kind of get to cherry pick the classes that are most useful for what I do. Oh yeah, yeah. If you guys have resources that you found to be useful, like definitely share them in the chat so that people like know what's up and can learn from each other, because that's how I got into this. Also, popular misconception, these things don't have that much caffeine in them. Like this one can is 80 milligrams, which is like a small cup of coffee. It's mostly, it's for when I get tired of drinking coffee and I just want something that tastes slightly different. So I'll pick one of these instead. What prompted me to make videos on YouTube? So fun fact, this is actually my second YouTube channel. The first one has been removed from the internet, so if you can find it, good luck. But the big thing was that I had been doing a lot of science communication already, and I think I also talked about this in the State of the Union video that I did last year. But the big thing was that I've been doing a lot of science communication. I've been getting into artificial intelligence research, and I was interested in learning more about the ethics side of it, interested in doing more self-studying. And like, I think like a lot of people my age, like Crash Course and like channels like that were like huge for me in my education. Like they were the things that like got me through a lot of classes when I didn't understand what we were being taught in class. And so I found, I was looking for that kind of content on YouTube and I just like didn't find it. And so that was kind of what prompted me to be like, well, I've been doing a lot of science communication, science education work. I'm interested in like doing more, but I don't necessarily want to do classroom because that's what I've been doing for a while. And so I wanted to do, you know, some other platform that would be a place where I could like develop new skills and, you know, learn more about the field that I was already pretty interested in. And so YouTube seemed like an interesting place to go for something like that. And it also was like a niche that seemed like it wasn't being addressed on YouTube. So I figured that like, if, you know, there were a place for this to be somewhat successful, it would be YouTube. This is the link to the longer video that I did on this topic. What does Red Bull taste like? So it's supposed to taste like citrus, I think. It's kind of hard to articulate. It tastes like chemicals. Like it doesn't taste like any sort of real food. It's kind of citrusy, I guess. I don't hate the taste. Probably because I've just gotten very used to it. Like I drink these, I drink Monsters, all sugar-free. Yeah, no, it's one of those things that I think you kind of have to drink to know what it tastes like because it's like so artificial. Yeah, if you're looking for math videos, definitely go to Grant's channel. Grant knows what's up. Grant's very good at this. Grant's also been doing this for much longer than I have. He's very nice and makes fantastic videos. Grant is 3 Blue 1 Brown for people who don't know his actual name because his face very rarely shows up in his videos. He came to MIT a couple months ago and we got to hang out and he was very cool. And yeah, it does help me. Being forced to teach this definitely helps me learn the actual concepts behind what I'm talking about. Um, do I have any thoughts on RFID chipping in relation to AI? Like, of things, pets, people? um, Generally against chipping of people. Oh, link to Grant's channel. I've done them already. That's Grant's channel. He just did actually a coronavirus video. It's the one before the reviews one. Yeah, Grant's great. If you want more like hands-on AI projects, you should check out Gerald's. He's also great. Super nice, makes crazy projects. I've been posting a little bit less lately because he keeps taking on these like increasingly difficult projects. Like I think he's building like an AI video game right now or something. And it's just like he's been working on it for almost a month now. So I'll link his channel too. He's very cool. I know. I was gonna say, what other channels do I watch? So I have like this account, which is like my education account, and then I also have my like original personal account that I keep separate, mostly to not mix the recommendations. But I watch a lot of Simon Clark. It's like helpful to see someone else go through a PhD and survive it. So his channel is good for that. Especially given that like a year of his PhD vlogs are like, my code doesn't work and I don't know why. And I was like, it's me. It's my whole life. Yay. So yeah, he's a good channel. I got into philosophy tube recently. That's such a good channel. Oh my god. The production quality of his videos are like wild. Levi Hildebrand is a cool one for like sustainability, zero waste stuff. Midlife Crisis. Rohan's like my favorite person in the YouTube sphere. He's very funny. His channel's on like medicine because he's a cardiologist. But he's super duper cool. Oh, that's exciting. Apparently my LLC paperwork finally went through, so I officially have a company. Yeah, so somebody pointed out that philosophy tube is not always balanced. I don't think that most philosophy or ideological channels are balanced. So that part actually doesn't bother me so much as long as I'm kind of going into it knowing what side they lean on. Essentially, I think that the entertainment value of his channel is still interesting. He did a video on data recently that's very interesting. But yeah, I mean, always keep in mind, like, I don't really talk politics on my channel, but like most of you can probably guess that I lean liberal. And so if you're ever watching like ideological videos, keep in mind that there's probably some level of personal bias there. Who else do I watch? Chubby Emu. His medical videos are super fun and also lightly terrifying. He did one on like somebody who had, what was it? So somebody who had sickle cell trait and then was dehydrated. And so I have sickle cell trait, not the disease. I'm totally fine. But like, I never understood why whenever I go see a doctor, they would always be like, and make sure not to get dehydrated. And he did a whole video on how like this kid like almost died because he had sickle cell trait and then got dehydrated and had all these medical complications from it. And I was like, oh, That's terrifying, but cool, but terrifying. I've also heard of ContraPoints. I think I heard of ContraPoints because there was some Twitter scandal, and that was probably why I haven't checked out that channel yet, because I try to avoid the Twitter, YouTube sphere scandals. But yeah, I'll have to check out that channel too. Simone Yates, of course. She's amazing. She's my idol. What else do I watch? Kyle Hill's new channel, which used to be Because Science and is now Kyle Hill's channel. He does some fun stuff. He has a level of energy that I like. Cannot imagine. 2 Minute Papers is a good channel, actually, if you guys are interested in like summaries of recent papers in like AI machine learning. He just defended for his PhD, which is like super congrats. But definitely does a lot of like very interesting papers, explains them really well. Very cool channel. Those are probably the big ones that I watch. Yeah, Ask a Mortician, because that's just cool. And then most of like the big tech channels, so like Mark Rober, Veritasium, Smarter Every Day, Tom Scott, who some of you may have seen that I collabed with like last year. Yeah, people in that area, Marcus Brownlee, Real Engineering. Those are the big ones, I think. Yeah, Braincraft, Up and Atom, people like that. Yeah, I heard about the earthquakes in Salt Lake City. That was, I don't know, 2020 is like shaping up to be, you know, like the seven plagues or whatever. Like this is some like biblical stuff that's going on at this point. So I'm very curious to see how the other 3/4 of this year goes. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Yeah, the Earth might want us gone. We've done this whole climate change thing, and now it's like you're done. That's it. Your lease is up. You can leave now. Oh, and then of course I watch like the Try Guys and like all of those big channels on my other account too. Let's see. So I'm gonna sign off in like 5 minutes. So I want to go through and make sure that I hit most of your questions. And if you guys have any other quick questions before we wrap this up, definitely ask them so I can get to them before it's time to go. Also, thanks to everyone who's always in the comments, like, I'm just waiting for your channel to blow up. It's funny because I have a bit of a like love-hate relationship with that because, as you all know, my day job is my PhD. And so there's been a lot of work going on behind the scenes on essentially turning this channel into a business instead of a hobby. And I'll probably have some announcements to make in the next like 3 months or so. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it would be really, really cool if it did. But it also like kind of terrifies me a little bit. Because then it's like I always want to make the best quality content for you guys and make sure that like everything's explained really well and that I'm like hitting topics that you guys are into, and there being more of you just like increases that pressure a little bit. But I'm excited. I'm trying to hit 10K by hopefully like the summer. So far I'm essentially on track. I usually bring in about 300 subscribers a month. So I'm thinking that I'll be able to hit 10K by this summer because YouTube has the Next Up program where they like fly you out to LA, they give you money, they give you training, they promote your videos. And so they're doing some for educational creators in the, let's see, I think they said Q2, Q3, so sometime over the summer probably. And so I can't apply until I get to 10,000 subscribers. So we shall see if I can make it there. And then it's also funny because people are always like, after your PhD, are you going to do YouTube full time? And I'm like, I'm not going to be doing my PhD for another like 4 years. So who really knows? So yeah, so right now I'm just trying to make good videos, keep making better videos, and then like, oh, sorry, it was in the middle of thought, and then I read a question. So the two quick questions. Can you give us an insight into the Austin flood? So I'm assuming this is like the Austin McConnell stuff. I really can't because until he recommended my channel, I had no idea that he existed and did not watch his videos. So the fact that he found me when I was at like 500 subscribers was like absolutely wild to me, and I had no idea that that was going to be a thing that happened. So it's hard to give any sort of insight into that because like that was all him, and I'm super thankful that he helped me, or he helped you guys find my channel. But like I have no idea. How long does it take to get your PhD? So in the US, it takes usually 5 to 6 years. So I'm in year 2. I'm hoping for 5. I'm telling my advisors 5. That way, when it becomes 6, it will be 6 and not like 7. So yeah, that's how long it usually takes. I have a meeting with Andrew Trask tomorrow, actually. He, I think, is interested in partnering on some videos, and I have to see if I can do that for reasons that I cannot currently talk about, but should be able to talk about within the next like week or so. But yeah, I think that would be a cool partnership. I worked with PySift when I was doing a rotation in a different lab and was working on like privacy stuff. And so like the open mind stuff is like very cool and very useful. And it would be very cool to see if we can work something out. But I have like multiple contracts that I have to like retcon to make sure that I'm not in violation of any of them in the process. So, and yeah, the Tom Scott collab, that was fun. That was definitely one of those, like, he came to Boston to shoot a video. I can't remember which video it was now. But we have a Slack for educational creators. And so he posted in the Slack news like, hey, I'm in Boston. Does anyone like want to grab coffee? And I'd like never heard of him, never seen his channel, like did not know who he was. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Because I was also in Boston because I live here. And so we met up and we got coffee. And then he was like, we were just like chatting for like an hour and it was like super fun. We got to hang out. And then afterwards I looked up his channel and it was like, oh shit. Like, oh, you're a much bigger creator than I thought you were. But yeah, he's super nice. He was really cool. We got to hang out at EduCon last summer, and we'll not get to do that this summer because there is no EduCon US, which is very sad. But actually, I don't know if he's coming to ThinkerCon. I should ask. So yeah, so he's awesome. Is it in 5, including the 2 master's years? So my program doesn't give us a master's degree along the way. So in short, yes, but there is no master's. So yeah, what happens when I get to 10K? Aside from some stuff on, like there's stuff that you can do on the platform that you can't do otherwise. But the big thing is that I can apply for YouTube's Next Up program where you get support like from YouTube because they're basically like, we want to support creators with less than 100,000 subscribers, but you need to have at least 10K. So. Alrighty, it's 1 o'clock, so I'm going to get back to work. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If we're all, stuck inside for the foreseeable future, then I might try to do these a little bit more frequently to, give us all a break to hang out and hang with each other. But hopefully you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.